why you should never knock on a stranger's door. Once there was a man trying to check into a hotel. The woman at the front desk gave him his key and told him none of the guests are allowed to go into the room across the hall. He agreed, but as he continued to stay in the hotel, he grew more and more curious about the room he wasn't supposed to go in. At one point, he even walked down the hall to that room and tried the door. It was locked. Then he bent down and looked through the keyhole. He saw that it was just the same as his hotel room. But in the corner of the room there was a woman whose skin was extremely pale, almost a sickly white. Her back was to the wall so the man didn't see what she looked like. He almost knocked on the door, but then just decided to leave her alone. The next day he walked past the door again and decided to look into the keyhole. This time there was no hotel room and no woman. It was all just red. He thought that this seemed really strange, so he went to the front desk and asked about the room. After insisting on an answer, the woman at the front desk told him, "A long time ago, a man killed his wife in that room, and her ghost is still there. But these ghosts are not what you might imagine. They're completely white all over, except for their eyes, which are red."
Have you let anyone borrow your phone before? One woman let her son borrow her phone, but she could have never expected the terrifying things she saw after she got her phone back. So this woman got her new phone and she put it on the kitchen counter and went to watch some TV. That's when her son came in and asked if he could borrow the phone to play with it. The woman didn't think much of it at first, so she agreed, but she could have never known that this would lead to a terrifying discovery. When it was nighttime, she got ready to tuck her son into bed, so she went upstairs to his room, but he wasn't there. Then she ran over to her room and saw him sleeping on her bed with the new phone in his hand. She felt relieved, so she took her phone back and started looking through it. At first, nothing was out of the ordinary. She saw her background had changed, but it wasn't until she saw the photos that she found the horrifying surprise. There were many new photos on her phone that her son took around the house. The front door, the kitchen, and even photos of her taken from the back when she was watching TV. She started deleting these photos until the last one caught her eye. Instantly, she turned around, terrified. It was a photo of her son sleeping in her bed, but it was taken by someone else, someone standing above him, and on the edge of the photo was half of a stranger's face.
When this video is over, you're going to Google 3 words. In 2013, a Canadian college student was traveling alone through California when she decided to spend the night in a notoriously sketchy hotel in Los Angeles. When she didn't check in with her family that night, they actually called the police, and the police discovered that she was missing. And then the hotel released some insane footage of her in an elevator. As soon as she steps into the elevator, she presses all the buttons and then starts hiding in the corner, and then starts poking her head out of the elevator into the hall over and over again, as if looking for someone that was chasing her, but there's nobody in the hall. Then, inexplicably, she stands right in the threshold of the elevator and starts flashing her hands around like crazy and then runs away, and it's the last anybody sees her alive. It wasn't until a few weeks later, when residents of the hotel noticed a foul taste in their water, that they discovered her body floating in the water tanks on the roof. They ruled her death an accident, but that means she would have had to get onto a locked roof, climb a 10-foot-high water tank without a ladder, open a heavy lid, and wriggle inside the tank on her own.
Here are the most bizarre things that have ever happened at Disney World.
There was a time where a couple tried to smuggle a baby onto Space Mountain.
A couple was in line to ride Space Mountain when their duffel bag started to make noise, and the couple refused to open it.
So the cast member called security, and when they opened the bag, they saw a 6-month baby inside of it. The baby was okay, but my goodness.
People try to spread their loved one's ashes in the haunted mansion.
This actually happens way too often, and cast members have to try and stop it as much as they can.
It causes the ride to shut down temporarily for an emergency ash cleanup.
A husband made a very bizarre announcement at Cinderella's castle.
The family of 4 came in for dinner, and about halfway through, the husband politely stands up
and he announced that his wife of 15 years had been cheating on him. Wow.
In 2007, Tigger punched a teenager in the face.
Apparently the boy was messing with Tigger's costume and Tigger wanted him to stop and he didn't, and then punched him in the face.
Do you know there are true stories of people who found Coraline-like doors in their own houses?
Except it didn't take them to another world, it took them to places much creepier. In 2015, there was this couple who bought a new house and they found this tiny secret door disguised in their bookcase. So they were super intrigued and even excited. They were thinking maybe it would lead them to some hidden treasure or money. But as they were going through the passageway, they found a note that read, "If you're reading this, then you found the secret room." But instead of something exciting, it said, "It's filled with black mold." The walls inside this secret room were covered. There was so much of it that the previous owner and his children were constantly getting sick from it. So the couple immediately packed their things, left the house, making sure to sue the agent who sold them the mold-infested house in the first place.
If you're ever driving late at night, don't do what they did. One night, a boy and his friend were on their way to a school dance when they saw a girl on the side of the road looking lost. They stopped the car and asked if she needed a ride, and she asked them to take her home. They said that they were going to a school dance and asked if she wanted to come too. She agreed. But these boys wouldn't know yet that this girl was not an average hitchhiker. So they all got in the car and the girl sat in the back seat. After a while, the girl would constantly say that she was cold, so one of the boys gave her his jacket. They got to the dance and things were pretty normal, but what happened after would make the boys question reality. When the night was almost over, it was finally time to take the girl home. When they almost arrived, the girl told them where she lived but told them to drop her off close by so she can walk the rest of the way. So that's what they did. But after the girl walked away, the boy who let her borrow his jacket realized that he never asked for his jacket back. His friend said that they could just come back tomorrow for it. The next morning, they came back expecting to get the jacket and leave, but things were not so simple. They came up to the girl's house and knocked on the door, but they were shocked at what they discovered as soon as the door opened. Follow for part 2.
This is why you should always be afraid of Australia. In 2014, an 8-year-old and her family went on an extended vacation to, you guessed it, Australia. After a couple of days, she started having this horrible recurring nightmare where an alien would appear in her room and try to grab her with its tentacle. After a week of this, she is terrified to go to sleep, but her parents keep telling her that it's just her overactive imagination. One night, she swears she feels that thing grab her leg and she leaps from the bed screaming. Her family runs into the room and they see her hysterical in the corner, and then they look at the bed and they all gasp. It wasn't an alien. It was a 7-foot-long adult carpet python that had been sneaking in through the ceiling tile and into her bed to stay warm every night.
This was one of the creepiest Barbie dolls that was ever sold in stores.
This was called the Barbie Video Girl doll that came out in 2010.
She came with a real working camera disguised as her necklace, and a video was projected onto her back. The issue here is that it could record up to 30 minutes of video, and even the FBI became worried about what this children's toy could be used for.
People were concerned that this video Barbie was always watching.
Then there was another doll called Hello Barbie, and she, on the other hand, was always listening and was happy to record your conversations and send that data via Wi-Fi to Mattel.
So these two Barbies really freaked out parents because it really seemed like an invasion of their privacy.
Did you hear about the tragic accident that happened on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride?
Because of this accident, there's apparently a real ghost that lives inside this ride. The ghost is said to be a construction worker named George, but during the construction of this ride, George was unfortunately crushed by a large piece of the set that killed him instantly. So now it's said that his spirit lingers there, and staff members have to say good morning to him when they arrive to work and farewell when they leave.
If they don't, he'll make life tough for them by causing the Pirates of the Caribbean ride to malfunction and break down throughout the day.
It's said that he especially likes to haunt any females that go on this ride. There's been complaints of their hair being pulled or being poked on the back.
But the saddest thing is that shortly after the theme park opened, a sad-looking older woman would periodically visit the attraction and ask to ride alone. Cast members then reported seeing her speak to nobody and sobbing into her ride boat.
And then apparently it was revealed to be George's heartbroken mother, which is horrible.
So I have this neighbor who I've never spoken one word to at all. Every time I drive by in my car or when I had only a bicycle, I would ride by, we would just wave towards each other. That's it. That was our whole communication. And today I decided to go get some coffee from the gas station and everything, and I drive by and I see his garage doors open, we wave at each other, and I go get my cup of coffee, and then I also get him a cup of coffee so I can finally meet this guy who I've just been waving to for the past year and a half. I pull into his driveway, and this older gentleman, this old man, got up, smile on his face, and I gave him a cup of coffee, and his daughter walks out, and she tells me that he actually has autism, and his favorite part of the day is when I go to work or I come home from work and we wave at each other. That is his favorite part of the day. That hit me right in the heart. That made me feel so good. So just by a simple act of waving, I made somebody's day.
There is a creepy lost episode of Barney that a father swears he caught his kids watching.
One day he was looking at the TV guide when he saw that it said a lost episode of Barney was going to air at 7 p.m. He asked his kids if they wanted to watch, and they said yes.
They all sat down to watch it, and the theme song started playing, but something wasn't right about it. It almost sounded like the song was being whispered. The episode started as it usually did, the kids holding the Barney doll that suddenly comes to life.
But when Barney started talking, he sounded slightly weird. It sounded like two people were talking at once. His normal voice and one that sounded darker and scarier. And suddenly he said,
"Hi kids, today I'm going to talk to you about death."
So one of the kids asked him,
"Barney, what's death?"
He then chuckled and said,
"This is."
with his face suddenly turning angry, his teeth growing long, and then he eats the child. And then he proceeds to chase all the other children around, trying to eat them throughout the rest of the episode. And then at the very end of the episode, he sang the I Love You song as if nothing happened.
I got pulled over today, and the cop comes to my window and goes, license, registration, and proof of insurance. And I look at him, I say, "Officer, I don't have my license on me, I don't have my registration, I don't have any proof of insurance." So then the cop looks at me and goes, "Then why the hell were you speeding? I caught you going 90 and a 65. And I look at him and I say, "Officer, the reason I was speeding was because I just killed my girlfriend. I chopped her up and I put her in my trunk." So the cop backs off my window, says, "Listen, boy, wait right here." And he calls every cop in the area to come look at my car. So my car is now surrounded by cops, and the chief of police does a whole check. He checks my trunk, and all he finds is a backpack. So then he comes to my window. So the chief of police comes up to my window and says, "Listen, the officer who pulled you over said you had no driver's license, no proof of insurance, no registration, and that you just chopped up your girlfriend and put her in the trunk. But when I looked in the trunk, all I found was a backpack. I found nothing." And I look at the chief of police and I say, "Yeah, I know. This lying son of a bitch probably told you I'm speeding too, right?" So I've been wanting a new truck for like a while now. So yesterday I went up to my dad and I said, "Hey, Dad, can you buy me that new F-150 they just got at the dealership?" So my dad looks at me and goes, "You know what? I'm going to buy you that truck." And I was so surprised, believe me. He says, "You want me to buy you this truck? Do me one thing. Go into our backyard and list all the types of trees we have in the yard, all right? And then come back to me." I was like, "Dad, let me get this straight. You want me to go into our yard and list all the types of trees that we have, like the oaks and the maples and stuff like that?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's exactly what I want you to do. List all the trees, then come back to me and we'll go to the dealership together and we'll buy you that truck." So I go outside and like an hour later, I finally come back. I have a list of like 30 trees, like maples, oaks, pines, evergreens. And I show it to my dad and he looks over the list. So my dad's checking the list and I'm all excited. And then he goes, "You missed one." I go, "Dad, what kind of tree did I miss?" He goes, "You missed the money tree." And I go, "The money tree? We don't have a money tree." Then my dad was like, "Exactly, so don't expect me to buy you a truck."
This man's wife left him, but not for the reasons he thought. Once there was a couple who just got married in Paris. They were very happy together, but the wife had one secret she didn't tell her husband yet. She had a birthmark on her face. She'd been wearing makeup to cover it, but she thought once she showed her husband, she would know whether he truly loved her. So after they got married, she took off her makeup and showed him. He was surprised, but he wasn't going to let that change anything. However, the next morning, his wife was gone. Her husband thought that she must have felt upset due to how surprised he looked when he saw her birthmark. Or maybe she had second thoughts. After months of getting no reply, he finally gave up on trying to look for her. He was heartbroken, but after a few years, he got a new job in a different city. He wanted a fresh start in life, but things didn't go as planned. He came across a strange-looking circus called the House of Oddities. This made him very curious, so he went in, but what he saw inside would shock him. Among the other circus acts, he saw a twisted woman rocking back and forth, looking terrified. He screamed as he recognized the birthmark on her face.
This is why you should never explore abandoned ships. In 2014, the US Navy decided to decommission one of its oldest ships, so it brought it into port to be broken down for scrap. Before workers were allowed to actually start breaking it down, the foreman had to go on board and take pictures of every room. So late one night, the foreman spends about an hour walking through this abandoned ship with a flashlight, taking about 100 pictures. When he was done, he emailed the pictures to his boss, who quickly wrote back, "Who's the guy with the axe?" The foreman had no idea what he was talking about, but he noticed the boss had attached one of the pictures that he had just sent him. When he opened it, he nearly fainted. There, in the bowels of the ship, poking his head around a corner, was a faceless man wielding an axe. The foreman had spent over an hour in this hallway and never heard or saw this guy. The Navy searched the ship and never found this guy. They also reviewed security footage of the only entrance, and he never entered or left the ship.
If you receive a creepy tea party invitation in your mailbox, throw it out right away and don't attend the party. There's a legend about this girl who received a strange invitation. It was sealed with wax, it looked super old, but it didn't say who it was from. It gave an address, a time, and a dress code. But the creepiest part about it is that at the very bottom of the invitation it said, "No +1s allowed. Arrive unattended." Obviously her parents were really sketched out and they told her not to go to this place and to throw out the invitation right away. But the next day her parents went into her bedroom and she was nowhere to be seen. They saw the invitation lying open on her bed and they knew that she had gone. Now after this she was never seen again. And when her family went to the address the tea party was said to be, they arrived at an abandoned old building. It was then found out that multiple people had gone missing that month after receiving a strange tea party invitation. investigation.
Warning, this is why you should not touch an old house. A woman recently bought an old house in a very remote area. She wanted to renovate the home, and very quickly she began tearing down the kitchen and ripping all the old wallpaper off. She claimed the wallpaper was extremely satisfying to rip off, like scabs of a sunburn. Very quickly she noticed names and dates in places she was removing the wallpaper. One night she was curious and spent hours googling one of the names. She discovered they were missing people, and the dates they went missing matched what was written on the wall. She called the police, and when they arrived they said, "Yep, it's human. What you were removing from the walls was not wallpaper."
Most people believe these 3 things will save your life. They don't. Let's pretend that you're on vacation with some friends in this cabin, and you hear on the news that there's actually a killer on the loose in the woods surrounding your cabin. What do? Instinctively, you're going to want to ditch your friends and just start running into the woods. No shoes, no weapons, no cell phone, no sense of where you're going. But that's actually a terrible idea because the killer is in the woods, and you'd be putting yourself more in harm's way, not less. So you decide to stay put, and then you remember that your friend drove you all to the cabin in their brand new Lamborghini that was working like 5 minutes ago. So why can't you just pile into that and drive away to safety? The problem with that is anytime you're in a cabin in the woods and there's a killer on the loose around your cabin, even if it's a brand new car, it's not going to start. So don't even go out and try it. You're just sitting in the cabin doing nothing when all of a sudden you feel like someone could be watching you and you want to turn around and make sure no one is. Don't turn around, because if you do, the killer will magically appear behind you. This is why you should be careful what you put in the mail. In 2015, a man was asked by his neighbor to collect his mail while he was gone for a few weeks. A few days later, a large package arrives on his neighbor's front porch. The man can barely lift it, but gets over to his garage where he accidentally drops it and hears something break inside. Hoping his neighbor would think the damage occurred en route, he closes his squeaky garage door and forgets about it. But over the next couple of days, whatever was in that package started to smell so bad that he decides to open it up. Inside were 2 very important finds: his neighbor, who was dead, and a camera that was still recording. The police bring the man in for questioning and show him what was on the camera inside the box. It starts with his neighbor talking to the camera about how excited he is to mail himself home for his YouTube channel. Then, police fast forward to the very end where they see that the neighbor is now sleeping in the box, and then suddenly gets dropped and you hear a crack, and that's his neck breaking. And then you hear a squeaky garage door close.